Hello and welcome to The Exchange.
Today we are discussing a highly sensitive subject that can divide public opinion. Obviously, death isn't a light-hearted topic, but it's something we all face. No one likes to suffer or see a loved one in pain. Should something be done to alleviate it?
We make choices every day, what we wear, eat, and where we work and live. But should we have a right to choose when we die? And if so, what are the consequences?
Death and dying is one of the most controversial and least discussed issues of our time, especially when it comes to the euthanasia debate. We don't get to choose when we come into this world, but for some, after battling chronic illness, the right to die with dignity is a freedom of choice they desire to control. Should we have the right to choose? Or are there some things we just shouldn't control?
To discuss this topic, we're joined by pro-euthanasia campaigner Peter Short, who is terminally ill and is fighting for his right to die with dignity. Thank you for joining us, Peter.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're also joined by the President of Right to Life, Margaret Tighe. Right to Life Australia defends the right to life of all human beings from conception until natural death. Welcome, Margaret. Good to have you.
Pleasure.
Now, Peter, 5 years ago, you were diagnosed with esophageal cancer and you thought or believed you'd made a full recovery. How are things for you now?
So now I'm in a really unusual space because in February I had a 3 to 9 month diagnosis in terms of terminal outcome, and today it's month 10, day 11. So I don't know how long the journey is going to keep going, but it's very interesting.
And how would you define your health right at this moment? Like, how well would you say you are?
In all aspects other than eating, so I can't swallow very well, so I'm really down into moving fast to a liquid diet. And in terms of breathing, my esophageal cancer is metastasised into my lungs,
Right.
so what'll kill me is that. And so I have trouble breathing, especially if I exert myself sitting here, but if Margaret gives me a run in the conversation, I'm liable to start coughing.
So we're going to go gentle on him, Margaret.
Yeah, that's right.
How did you come to campaign against euthanasia?
I became very involved, firstly, in the demands that were surfacing at the time to legalise abortion. Now, I realise we're not talking about abortion today, but the two things are related because we're talking about the taking of human life. And so I became very involved in that, and I remember attending a meeting held at the Melbourne Town Hall, and in those days a lot of people used to turn out to talk about the issue of abortion. There was a doctor from South Australia, a Dr. Ted Cleary, and he was one of the speakers, and he was a very good speaker. And I remember he said, and if we allow the legalisation of abortion, as night follows day, eventually they will be wanting to legalise euthanasia. And I thought to myself, oh, come on, you are exaggerating. I didn't say it.
How long
but
ago
I
was
thought
this?
That was 1970.
Okay.
Well, how right he was, because sadly, once you decide that there are some lives not worthy to be lived, unfortunately, it is a slippery slope. It doesn't happen overnight, but we can see with the acceptance of euthanasia in some countries and in a few states in the United States, we can see that it has been a slippery slope indeed. And I have to question, why is this so when we're living in a world and such enormous advances have been made in medical research, in medical science, in pain relief? But the bottom line is, once you legalise something and you give to a certain group in the community the power to kill others and to say it's going to be dying with dignity, I don't believe that's the case at all. I don't believe that's a dignified death at the end of a lethal syringe or swallowing an overdose of some tablets.
Yeah. So Peter, you have made the decision that you would like to end your own life at a time that is best for you. Why have you made that choice? I mean, I understand, that in your case, you are terminally ill. There is no way out of this. Why have you made that decision?
Well, there's two pieces. The first is I haven't made the decision that I'm going to kill myself with Nematol. What I have done is I've put myself in a position where I will have the choice to do that if I so choose.
Yes.
And I don't know whether I will or I won't.
Exercise that.
But the thing that is a driving force for me in why the laws should change, when I started this journey, for the first 3 months, I was in a palliative care process. I'd sort of mapped out what would happen, which would probably be a bed downstairs, a potty, eventually, depending what happened, probably levels of drugs, and then you'd pass away. But then I came across Rodney Syme and started to learn about the option of choice at end of life. And I then started thinking about what that actually meant for me and for my family. And I became quite passionate about having the option when I could barely, because I'm going to die from probably being unable to breathe. And there's all sorts of drugs you can take to alleviate that for a while, and then you just starve yourself to death. But when I started thinking about that, versus when it gets to a stage, you just know that, you know, get out of a chair and you're gasping, you can have an option of having a proper farewell with your wife and your son. That's freed me up for the last 6 months because I have no concerns about my death. I'm not worried about it, and I embrace with great joy the fact that I have a choice, and that helps me, it helps my family, and my family are a very important part in this because I'm gone, but how intact I can leave them is very important.
And Margaret, how different do you see any difference at all in the difference, you mentioned abortion, which is someone making a decision for another person, versus in this situation, Peter or someone else is making a decision for themselves. Do you see any difference in that at all?
Well, it's not as simple as that, really, because in relation to the passage of euthanasia legislation and countries where it has been in practice, you will find it's been slowly but surely, particularly the Netherlands, slowly but surely, the category of killable patients has widened so that now people with serious mental illness, and let's face it, often somebody suffering from a very serious mental illness can be in a much more distressing state than somebody with a serious physical illness. And I'm sure you would agree about that. And as well as that, now to disabled children who are having some serious illness, that has been included in the category. And so you have to ask yourselves, you know, is this the best thing we can do for people? To say, well, the best we can do for you is to give you, they talk about giving you a choice, to say, I want to decide when I die. There's no such thing as a right to die. We're all going to die one day. But tragically, once the right to die, the so-called right to die, becomes ensconced in society, it ultimately becomes a duty to die. And why we mustn't legislate in this way is because we have to protect people who will be very vulnerable. And I remember years ago reading a result of a survey which was published in the British Medical Journal in October 1984, it's a long time ago, and they had conducted a survey of families who had recently lost a loved one, and they had asked, did the deceased request euthanasia? Less than 4% did so. What was the main reason for doing so? Fear of being a burden to their families. And I say this genuinely, many people, and they're living in a loving family, a family where the son or daughter are doing everything to care for, say, the elderly mother who's very ill, doing everything, and they're doing it lovingly, but the person who's very ill and dying sees that it's a strain on them, it's putting a burden on the family, and they can often unselfishly, they think, say, look, I'd be better off out of the way. I well remember when there was a debate in the Federal Parliament in 1966, 67 was in the Senate. Well, it was interesting to hear the speeches that were made, and they had applied themselves very well. They were dealing with this legislation which was going to overturn the Northern Territory euthanasia law. And I well remember lobbying a woman senator, and she said she'd thought a lot about this, and at first she was attracted to the idea of legalising euthanasia. And then she thought about her mother, who was quite ill and lived in the country, and she said, I knew that if an election had been called and I had to be very busy with that election down in the city, my mother would and euthanasia was legal, she said, look, my life isn't worth living anymore, I've had my life. And so that's why she voted against it.
Yeah. As we need to take a break, Peter. I just quickly want to get your response to what Margaret is saying there about...
Is there a quick response?
Yeah, well, that's what I'm wondering.
A very quick response
is
we are living in the 21st century. It's all very well to talk about things 40, 50 years ago, but Margaret, grow up and move on. In terms of using emotive words like killable people and quoting a few stories, we can sit around and have some grandmother anecdotes, or we can deal with some facts. And after we come back, let's talk about Di Natale's bill and how to protect Australians and give them a right.
Yep, good.
All right, sounds good. We'll be back in just a moment with Street Talk and more on The Exchange.
Do you believe people who are terminally ill should have the right to die if they are suffering?
Yes, I do. I really think that if you haven't got a good quality of life, then you should be able to make the decision to end it.
Yes. And why do you believe that?
Because they have the right to die. They have the right to make their own choices if they're mentally stable and deem that they're in a good place, making wise choices and empowered decisions. Yeah, why shouldn't they?
I really do think that they have the right to die, yeah. I think euthanasia is one of those things that will require further debate, certainly in the UK where I come from anyway.
Absolutely, I believe that they should have the right. If you have a fatal disease or something that will certainly end in your death, I think you should be able to have the choice, particularly if it's going to take you out of so much pain for you and your family. It's going to save a lot of money on the health budget. And I think ultimately we have so much choice about all sorts of things in life. Why don't we have a choice about our death?
If you are terminally ill and there's no medical hope, then why not? We've got enough people in the world to make up for me when I die.
I think so, a little bit. Or it depends how badly they're suffering, all right, but I think if it's their choice that they want to go, I think it should be their choice and nobody else's, really.
Yeah, I do actually. I think that once somebody gets to a stage where they no longer wish to live, that it should absolutely be their own individual right.
Oh, I just think it's cruel. I think we can look after our animals, we can put them out of their misery, and we can't do anything about our family or ourselves.
Well, I think it's a personal wish that should be followed. I know there are legal problems and moral problems, and they'll need to be addressed, but I believe it's a person's right to follow their own desire.
And do you think age affects that decision?
No. No, I don't.
So long as they have enough decision-making skills, if you can call them that, to make that decision, then yeah.
I don't think age has anything to do with it. I do think what is the key element is the fact that you've been diagnosed with something fatal.
Not if they've got to a certain stage where there is no alternative.
I suppose you kind of would want her to see a person under 18 making that decision. I think it'd have to be an adult anyway to make a decision like that.
No, I actually don't. I just think that if the time has come, the time has come.
If you're sick and you're in pain and you're suffering and there's no value to life, you have the right to choose.
Welcome back. We're discussing the right to die with pro-euthanasia campaigner Peter Short and Right to Life President Margaret Tighe. And Sandra, our Street Talk reporter, joins us now. Hi there.
Hi, good to be here.
Sandra, that was fascinating. I actually am shocked that there was not some negative thoughts on it.
I was
all
stunned,
positive.
to be honest. It was the opinion all went one way, no matter what age I was talking to. As you would see from the package, I spoke to quite various people of different ages and demographics, and yet everyone was conclusive on the same answer, which I thought was quite surprising.
Does it surprise you, Peter?
Not at all. 80% of Australians, and give or take whether you cut them by religious denominations, by ethnic groups, etc., 82% of Australians, in any way you measure it, come up saying those sorts of things, and they support the right for choice.
Is the majority always right, though?
So we're a democratic society. So parliamentarians are there to reflect the needs of the people, and if we choose to go down a different route than majorities and democracies, well, maybe that's a valid question. But in this country, the system is set for representations, majorities, and this is where the difficulty is, because the Parliament does not represent the people, because it's stuffed with a whole lot of people with vested interests who have historically harboured the sorts of views we were hearing before.
So can I just ask a question, because I need some clarification on this. I'm a little bit, need to learn about it. Doctors actually do this at the moment. So where are we? You would agree that by giving extra morphine Margaret, you wouldn't want someone to suffer either.
No, of course not.
No.
But what we have to talk about is their intention. And of course, adequate pain relief is given to patients who are in need of it.
But a doctor knows when they're giving excess morphine doses that the pain relief versus this is going to be the last. Yeah, this will be the last dose.
Once again, I have to stress that it's what the intention is, and if on the other hand the doctor says, well, look, I think I'm going to give him a good shot, I wanted to die. If on the other hand they're giving an adequate amount of pain relief and as a result that patient dies, it's so important, the intention. And I beg to differ. I don't think the majority of doctors do practice euthanasia. I think that there are some who would be practicing it. One thing too was in relation to what one lady referred to, how we put down our pets, and we do. But we also have dogs put down when they've bitten people or when they've been barking incessantly. People don't have to go to the vet and say, oh, they haven't passed a law to allow you to put my dog down, but he's driving me silly. And I mean, we know this happens. So don't equate us with animals. I don't believe that that's appropriate.
If we look at the law itself, so what is Dina Tali proposing? The bill proposes that people who have terminal illness, such as myself, or incurable suffering, and there'll be some, as a result of the Senate inquiry, there'll be some further definition around what that means.
Yes.
And it says that under those circumstances, with very strict guidelines, with a psychiatrist, multiple doctors, the person requesting is actually the person that will take the drug themselves. There is a provision for if they're incapable of them finding a doctor to do so, but there is all sorts of controls around this. It's not about putting a dog or a cat down. It's about a very reasoned, rational decision by an individual expressing their freedom of choice to make a decision. And as you saw from the, I'm astounded that in this in any show that you see a clips like that, I thought that probably you would have gone out of your way to find a 50-50 balance, but that video says it all.
Yeah, I mean, I was astounded by that. Margaret, I'm interested to know, because we've talked a little about legislation. Yeah. I'm interested to know, have you yourself come up personally with terminal illness and maybe watch somebody suffer and die?
Yes, I have. My sister-in-law had esophageal cancer, and I was very close to her. And when she was diagnosed with it, my late brother, who was quite a lot older than I, he was devastated when he heard what his wife's diagnosis was, and he had heart trouble. And he admitted to me the day before he died about 6 months before his wife, and he said, hearing Joan's diagnosis really finished me off, because he knew it's a horrible disease. And but what amazed me, and I realise, I accept that every patient is different, I was amazed at the treatment that she had. She would go into hospital for a while and she'd have laser treatment. They'd be shrinking the tumour, and she excuse me, she had to have as you know, sloppy food and yogurt and things like that. And she was amazingly cheerful, and I was with her just before she died, and I was amazed at her peaceful death. The GP was coming and obviously giving her some pain relief, but she wasn't after it. She was very lucid and making little jokes and things like that. My sister-in-law's life wasn't saved, but I was amazed at how well they were cared for. And so I really still have to go back to the fact that, like, the state of Oregon in the United States, they've legalised physician-assisted suicide, where the doctor can prescribe medication, the patient can take it. But reports that have been carried out there showed that 2/3 of those people who have accessed physician-assisted suicide and 2/3 who have requested it, they were depressed. They were suffering from depression, and
But I think that's what Peter was saying. The governing around this would be there would be a psychiatrist there, and most people on the package said that people would be in their right mind.
Yeah. And Oregon's an interesting one because just recently a lady by the name of Brittany Maynard, 29 years old,
Yes.
married, was planning to have a family, very outdoorsy sort of woman. She had advanced brain tumour, and it was the sort that was going to make her mentally dysfunctional. And so she moved from California to Oregon because a couple of statements she said were, you know, there's not a single cell in her body that doesn't want to keep living, but she knows the reality is what was going to happen, and she wanted to be in a place that supported and nurtured and surrounded by the law, and so she moved from California because Oregon would support her. As against people like me, you know, I've been a fantastic citizen. I've paid millions of dollars of taxes over my life. I've done lots of good things, done a few bad things, but the last thing I'm going to do is break the law, worrying about whether the bloody police are going to come in and take my phone and give my kid and wife a hard time. It's just unfair.
So just on the sorry, can I just ask one quick question? On the Brittany situation, she very publicly made a decision on the 1st of November.
Because she was faced with a time bomb in her head.
Yeah.
And when that bomb went off, she was no longer able to make decisions. She'd no longer be considered rational, etc., etc.
So therefore she wanted to make the decision.
So she had to make a decision before she was incapable of making a decision.
Right.
And that's really what sparked, you know, the whole global story. But, you know, good on her. How brave was she? And, you know, it's a sad story, but it's a very great story at the same time.
All right, thank you for your comments. And Sandra, thanks for Street Talk.
Pleasure.
Really good. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Welcome back. We're chatting with Peter Short and Margaret Tighe about the right to die. Peter, how would you govern it? You want to see euthanasia legalised. What do you think? You mentioned a few minutes ago, you know, have to be the proper kind of policies put in place. How would you actually govern this to make sure there weren't abuses?
Well, in a nutshell, you end up simply with a number of qualified people attesting to the fact that you are making a decision that is reasonable and rational given your circumstances. And then finally, it is for only people who are terminally ill or suffering incurably. So, you know, it's a narrow band.
But is this, as Margaret said before, the beginning of a slippery slope, whereas if we get this, then we'll get this, and then this, so on?
So I find slippery slopes, it's an easy thing to say, but again, it's an objectionable word used by people who just want to sort of cast this aside and move on. No offence. You know, we're back to, we have a government, we have laws, we have the need to live within those. Over time, will the laws that are passed be changed to expand or accommodate things in different manners? That will go through exactly the same scrutiny that this bill has gone through. And this bill, if it gets through, it's taken 30 years or so to get there. You know, the national anthem says, you know, Australians all let us rejoice, for we are young and free. Well, how does the free bit work in this conversation?
And just to finish up, Margaret, your thoughts on...
It's a very, very dangerous step to say some people are able to be killed. We're going to live in a community. We're going to give power to some doctors to kill others. It's a very dangerous proposition, a very slippery slope. We've seen evidence from countries that are doing it overseas, and this country of ours, with an increasingly ageing population, I'd say don't go down that path.
But it's a necessary conversation.
It is a necessary conversation, and one I'm sure that we will continue to have. Peter and Margaret, thank you so much for your time today. Really appreciate your input. And thank you for watching. Please go to our website for a fact sheet, as well as more information about the exchange. Hope to see you next time.
See you then.
Is that ultimately the answer?
This is the extraordinary thing. We have to ask ourselves, why is there this push now when we've made so many advances in the development of medical care, palliative care, pain relief? And if you speak to doctors who work with people who are in need of good pain relief, etc., they're not in favour of this. They say, well, I may as well give up. I may as well, excuse me, give up what I'm doing. And you take Belgium. 50% of people who have had their lives ended didn't request it. The other thing is, the bottom line is, you have to ask yourself, excuse me,
Margaret.
Well, there is
Please
evidence.
send it to me after the show.
I can send you plenty, Peter. But the bottom line is, if we believe that this is a good and proper thing to do, to change the law, to give to some people the power to kill others, and you say you're doing it for good reasons, well,
it's not the power
and it's only for those who ask for it, not for anybody else. Well, if you think it's such a good idea, why would you deny it to people who you see are in extremis, are suffering, and they can't ask for it? And of course you won't deny it to those people.
But that's disingenuous.
There's certainly there's so much in the conversation that is arguable. One of the things that I have found challenging, like you, Peter, seeing how things are shifting, and we have to be prepared to listen to the voices of people and the people who are going through this. And I think even I've been surprised, even talking to medical practitioners, I would have thought, Margaret, that, like you said, that they said this is not the way they feel, but they are seeing things differently. It is a different age.
And it's on, if you read through the submissions to the Senate hearing, there's lots of stuff about doctors for euthanasia, etc., etc., etc. So there is absolutely two sides to the coin, but to say doctors don't in a grand sweeping statement is rubbish.
I'm talking about doctors like, for example, Dr. Daniel Thomas in Adelaide.
So he's one doctor.
Who's done one, yes, and others who work in that field of caring for cancer patients in particular, and who work developing proper pain relief. And that's what I'm talking about. And